Greetings, I'm Pastor R.A. McGee of the I Can Church here in Newark, Ohio. As you can tell from behind me, the balloons in our foyer, we had a celebration to start gathering together to have church again, to serve the Lord together. Just a good spirit. I felt all the love from the saints here. It was just nice to be here. So today I'd like to start my lesson with a story about something when I was a young boy that we had as a parakeet. So Mom had went to the store in Zanesville, and down at the Woolworth store, she had bought a parakeet in a cage and brought him home. So us kids were all excited to have that parakeet in the house. And he gave us a lot of joy. He would dance, he would sway to the music, and the dogs would be barking outside, and he would be barking in cadence with them, and he'd dance around. He's a feisty little thing, but he was just a fun little bird to have. Mom called him Pretty Boy, but us kids all called him Elvis, Elvis Parakeet. So one day, we'd had him for a couple of years, but one day it was a real hot summer day. We were all outside, and my uncle came out, and he had Elvis sitting on his shoulder. As he walked out the door, he said, "Look what I taught Elvis." And all of a sudden, there went Elvis, flying off into the woods. So we all charged after him, ran up through the woods, and pretty soon it was in the thick woods. We couldn't find him, and we searched for him all the rest of the day up until it got dark, and we was all pretty bummed, pretty upset about it. And all went back to the house, and Mom was especially upset because that was her little bird. So anyway, fast forward a couple of weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I'm down at the creek playing. And when I say creek, I'm talking about more like a small river, probably 30 foot wide. It had some deep holes in it, maybe 15, 20 foot deep. So we're down there by the creek playing, and there's an older boy with us. And I was about 11 or 12, he's probably about 14. So as we're down there messing around by the creek, there's 3 or 4 of us down there. All of a sudden, that older boy said, "What's that floating on that piece of wood out there in the middle of the creek?" So he'd already dove in and swam out to it. And as I looked out there, I thought, that can't be what I think. And he snatched it off that piece of wood as it was just floating by. He said, "It's a parakeet." So I just, machine gunned the whole story to him. Told him about how it got away, and he was our bird, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me with a wary eye, and he said, "You're going to have to prove it to me. I don't know if it's your bird or not." I said, "Well, he's got a crooked beak and 2 toes missing." He looked out that bird. He said, "It's your bird." So I took off my T-shirt, made a little nest, and put him in my T-shirt and ran back up, hopped on my bike, and went racing home. And we got to the house. We put him in the bottom of his cage. He couldn't even sit up. He was so worn out. He's probably starved half to death. But he just laid in the bottom of the cage. Mom put him in a dark room and put a cover over his cage. And we all worried about him all day and all that night. But the next morning we get up, and guess what? Elvis is up on his perch, and he's just singing away. So we was all real happy. So why am I telling you this story? Well, this story is a lot like us serving the Lord. See, we live for the Lord, and we live with His love and His care. But sometimes we try to get away and do things on our own and do things that's not right, but the Lord wants us to live with Him. So what Elvis really was is a pilgrim and a stranger in a foreign land. So I want to read one set of scripture here. 1 Peter 2:11 says, "Dearly beloved," and so he's talking to the church, "I beseech you, as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against your soul." So Peter's telling the church to abstain from fleshly lusts. In other words, not to live as the world does. Not to act like the world. Don't be hateful. Don't be mean. Don't be sad and rejected. We've got God on our side. He is here for us. And we should be showing that godly love to everybody we meet so they can see God living in us. So he's telling the church, we're just travelers in this land. We're just working our way through this land to get to where we belong, which is in heaven with God. So Elvis was the same way. So here's Elvis. He gets out of his cage. He flies in the woods. And I was talking to Dad, and I was thinking a few days, and Dad said, no more. It's more like 2 weeks. And so when we found Elvis, he was just almost dead. So think about what Elvis was, that little parakeet. He did not belong out in wild Ohio. He did not belong out away from the people that loved him, was taking care of him. He didn't know what to eat. He didn't know who to stay away from. He didn't know what to do with himself. But yet he was free because he flew away, just thought he was going to be living the high life away from his loving family. So Elvis did not belong out in Wild, Ohio, no more than we belong out in Wild, Ohio. We're supposed to be living for God, living in His love and His care. So a few little things I wanted to point out about Elvis. He didn't know how to survive out in Ohio, and we have a protector just as Elvis had a protector. Mom was his protector. She looked after that bird, and took care of him, and we weren't allowed to tease him and torment him. Mom was always after, so he had a protector just like we do. We have a nature to do what we want to do. So when Elvis saw that chance to fly off of my uncle's shoulder, he took it. And that's the way mankind is. That's why we all have that fleshly way of thinking about doing what we want to do, not what necessarily God wants us to do. We will die a spiritual death. Just as Elvis, if we had not found him in that miraculous way, he would have died out on that creek, floating down the creek to the Muskingum River. We'd have never saw him. So what's the odds, what's the chances that weeks later I would be standing by the creek and he'd come floating by on a piece of driftwood? You think about that. What are the odds of that happening? And you know what? We have better odds than that with God, because God sees us wherever we're at. He knows we need Him. And a lot of times we still want to do our own thing. We want to fly off in the wild Ohio and do our own thing, but God wants us to stick it out with Him. So as we look at this, what does the abstain mean? It's because Peter's telling the church, I beseech you, I'm urging you strongly, as strangers and pilgrims. We do not belong in this world. And he says, abstain from fleshly lust. So what does abstain in this text mean? To hold yourself away from it. To do what God expects out of you. Don't do that first thought that comes in your mind. Don't do what you think you want to do. Pay attention to what God wants you to do. And how do you learn to do that? We do it through the Bible. We do it through church. We do it through gathering together and doing what God wants us to be. So I'll read one more verse here. 1 Peter, 2nd chapter, 12th verse. Having your conversation, or this is your behavior, your lifestyle, honest, or it means to be beautiful, figuratively and literally, to be a beautiful person that people want to be around. Having your behavior, having your life, what you are, to be beautiful among the Gentiles. And that's what the non-saved, the Jews are one type of person, and Gentiles are what the rest of us are. We are all Gentiles saved by grace. So among the Gentiles, amongst our friends, amongst our family, we're to be beautiful in our behavior, to act what God wants us to act like. So whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which shall behold, glorify God in the day of visitation. So in other words, they'll see us living a life, and then when God moves on them to come to Him, they'll remember and they'll go see what God's all about. Because that's what our job is on this planet, is to save souls. Not to fly away from God, not to fly where we want to fly, but to fly the way God wants us to fly, to stick it out with Him. And that's all I have today. Church will be Sunday at 10 a.m. unless something comes up. We are going to start having church every Sunday at 10 a.m. So I'd love to see everybody show up. Come on out and visit, and you'll be treated great, and we'll all have a good time together serving the Lord. Thank you.